There's a hole at the center of this donut, and at the center of that hole is raspberry jam for the blood of Harlan Thrombey. What's up? My name is Casey Budge, and this is the Fake Crime Podcast. And tonight we're going to talk about one of my favorite villains in all of cinema, and one of my favorite movies. And it could partially be because it was one of the last movies that came out before COVID happened. So, it was literally the last movie that I saw in theaters before COVID. So that was part of it. I think I went and saw it like 2 or 3 times before when COVID was happening. But we're going to talk about Knives Out.
Yeah, I watched this film for the first time when Casey said we were going to record this episode, and 10 out of 10 would recommend. I think I'm going to have to go watch it again to catch all the little details. So I'm excited to talk about it today.
It's really good. It's I think it's based on like an Agatha Christie novel or something of that nature, but it's one of the Benoit Blanc mysteries, and he is this southern folksy detective. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. So the story all starts when Harlan Thrombey is found dead in his eccentric mansion. He appears to have slit his own throat, and he is found out with this large, kind of ornate-looking knife in his hand, and he is found to have slit his own throat, and everyone thinks that it's a suicide. And the cops are all coming in, and they do their investigation, and that's kind of what they think it is as well for the whole time, until some other evidence comes to light. But the investigation carries out at the beginning like it is a suicide. And so about a week later, all of Harlan's family is gathered back together to answer questions about it, and it's also on the night of like a memorial service for Harlan too. And I will mention that Harlan's death came the night after his 85th birthday party. So Harlan Thrombey, it's important to know, was a eccentric billionaire. I don't know if he's technically a billionaire. I'm sure with his publishing
multi-millionaire.
Multi-millionaire? Yeah. Okay, all right.
Multi-millionaire is what his bio says.
Thanks for the fact check, Kate. He is a world-renowned publisher of these murder mystery novels. He is well known for having all of these different murder mysteries, and his house is laid out like a clue board with all sorts of secret passages in and out of it, and it's also like the grounds around it are also decorated with items that are reminiscent from some of his stories. There's statues and stuff that are pulled directly from his novels. So he's kind of living this eccentric lifestyle. And he is a little bit older, so he has a part-time nurse on staff with him. Her name is Marta Cabrera. And she is a registered nurse who was hired on initially for just like 15 hours a week to come and help him with any health needs that arose, and that slowly ramped up to her being there more and more just because he wanted a friend, basically, was kind of what it amounts to. She spent a lot of time with him, far more time than any of his family really spent with him in the time coming up to these events.
And I think it's important to note here that Marta is an immigrant to America, and her mother immigrated illegally into the country. So that plays a role in how the family feels about her initially. And during the first few scenes, we see them talking about immigration policy. The family is talking about immigration policy, and Marta walks in, and it's just this awkward interaction between them.
Yeah. Do you know where she's from?
She's from, I want to say Puerto Rico, but I don't think that's right.
Yeah.
I'll fact
So
check.
there's a scene in the movie. The reason that I don't want to say it and get it wrong is because there's this really funny scene in the movie where the family is all sitting around and talking about where she's from, and all of them like incorrectly say where she's from. Like each one of the family members says a different place where she's from. And there are a lot of scenes in the movie like that where like the whole family will go around and like tell their side of the story. Another part that's important in this story is that when you're watching the movie has a bunch of unreliable, like every single one of the narrators in this story is unreliable, including Marta, kind of the protagonist of this movie. She is at times even an unreliable narrator when she's telling the story in the beginning to the detective Benoit Blanc. So, yeah, Marta is a Brazilian immigrant who comes and takes care of Harlan. And Harlan is kind of the patriarch of this whole family. So, he had 3 kids. He had Linda Thromby. He had Neil Thromby, who is dead at the time of the story, and he had Walt Thromby. And through this one day, he goes through and systematically, basically, cuts off his whole family. So he threatens to tell threatens to tell Linda that Richard is cheating on her. He threatens to tell, or he does figure out that Joni has been double dipping into her daughter Meg's tuition money. So basically, Joni has been fraudulently taking double the tuition money from Harlan, because Harlan is very generous and he has been paying Meg's tuition, but Joni has been taking advantage of that and double dipping into it. And he takes away the running of the publishing company from Walt, because Walt is wanting to adapt these stories into movies and things like that, but Harlan doesn't want to do that. So there's this friction there, and Harlan eventually gets sick of it and doesn't and they come to a disagreement at the party, and eventually Harlan decides, you know what, you're right. These stories aren't yours to control, and it's been unfair of me to keep you tethered to these stories that aren't yours. So I'm just going to go ahead and take these away from you. So all of these changes are made kind of immediately on his party, and it all comes to a head. As well, we won't find this out later in the story, but Hugh Ransom Drysdale, who is Linda and Richard's son, he also finds out that Harlan has not only cut off his family in the manners that I've already spoke of, but he has also changed his will to leave all of his money, all of his business and house, all to Marta. And so that leads to another fight, all kind of happening at this party the night before he was murdered. So there are all these members of the family who have all these complex motives about whether or not they want him alive or not. And basically most of them have a reason to want him dead, but seemingly none of them have the means of killing him because it looks like it was a suicide. And that also is to say that everyone had seen Marta leave the party. Marta was accounted for leaving the party. She walked out very noisily. And then Harlan was also seen walking down the one creaky staircase. So everyone was kind of pointing to, well, like there was no other way to get up to Harlan up there. He was up in his study or in his bedroom, and there's no other way to get to him. So everyone was kind of pointing this and be like, "Yep, it was a open and shut case of uh, it was an open and shut case of suicide. He killed him. He killed himself, and that is kind of the hitch in the plan." But through this whole series of events, it is kind of slowly unraveled that there is more to this story. So from this point, we kind of branch into two sets of stories, which people like, kind of the version of the story that people think is going on, and a version that is actually happening at the moment. So we're going to stick with kind of the understood truth until we get to the kind of deductive conclusion at the end. So while all this is going on, Marta is understandably distraught. She, her boss and her friend has just died, and she is kind of rather upset about it. So she, she eventually has to come back in, tell her side of the story to the detectives along with all of the other family. During this time, it is also discovered that she's unable to lie, because if she lies, then she literally vomits. She cannot tell a lie because she will literally vomit if she does that. Which I think is kind of a cool, like, storytelling device in a story, don't you?
Yeah, I do too. It's makes the ending really very hilarious
Mhm.
when she eventually vomits upon the real villain.
Yeah, yeah, but we're getting ahead of ourselves once again.
Yeah,
So
but we're getting ahead of
through
ourselves here.
yeah, so through the course of the investigation, Blanc starts to piece together these clues that don't quite fit. It doesn't quite make sense. Uh, like all these little pieces aren't quite making sense to him. Do you remember kind of like the smoking gun of why uh he what was kind of the first thing that made him think that it wasn't a murder, or
Hmm.
that it wasn't suicide? I think it was when they were kind of looking for clues out around the grounds, and uh and he found a piece of the side railing of the house that could ostensibly be used to climb up this intricate piece. He found a piece of that that had been uh, broken off, and
Hmm.
was on the ground.
I think maybe before that they found prints in the mud leading back to the house, which didn't necessarily lead directly to a murder, but
No,
there's these little things that aren't quite adding up, including that um, he has the huge inheritance. Um, and I think that he starts to find out little pieces that everybody's story isn't necessarily true, and that each of the kids were being cut off. And so
yeah,
then all of these kids all of a sudden could be suspects.
yeah, yeah, for
And
sure.
then he finds mud and tracks through the mud back to the house. And then one of the dogs on the place brings a piece of railing that was broken off the ladder up to Harlan's study. And
Yeah,
one of the
and
dogs
and and,
brings
and
it
it's also
to him.
found that that there's another way to get up to Harlan's study, which is a secret window that opens, that is right out of another one of Harlan's novels. So it is no longer completely true that no one could have been uh, up in the attic, because there was this whole other secret way that someone could have gotten up to the study. So from this point on, they kind of continue the investigation, but it's time for the reading of the will. And at this point, everyone finds out what only Harlan already knew, and that is that Marta is the sole inheritor of everything. And I love this scene because when you're watching it back a second time, you know that that Ransom already knows. So when you're when you're watching this again, you're like, "Oh my god, this is he's just enjoying this whole thing. Like, he's just sitting here enjoying this chaos that's happening, because he knows that the that she wasn't going to inherit all this money, but everyone else freaks out they when they find out that she's the one inheriting all the money and not them. So they all freak out. They kind of all like gang up on her and like are yelling at her. So she just is like, okay, I'm just gonna leave. She goes to her car, and Ransom actually follows her and gets into the car with her, and they drive down and go to a diner, and they kind of have chats. Do you remember what they chat about there?
Yeah, so when they're sitting at the diner, tells her that um well, Hugh doesn't tell her, but she tells him exactly what happened.
Oh yeah,
She
that's when she like
confesses
reveals.
to him
Yeah,
her
and
side of the
and
story.
so he seems a little bit too excited about her confessing here. She seems a little bit too, or he seems a little bit too like calm, or like he doesn't get mad about it or anything like that. He just kind of is blank in his acceptance of this.
Mhm.
So
And he
um
says to her, he says, I'll help you out here. I won't tell anybody. We'll get through this, but you're going to cut me in on the inheritance. You're going to cut me in. You're going to give me my cut of the
yeah,
inheritance and not let the rest of my family in on any of it, which is what I want. And he's like, it's what
yeah,
Harlan would have wanted too.
yeah. Harlan and Hugh, aka Ransom, had this like strange relationship where like they were close, but they also fought all the time. So that was kind of their dynamic. Was they were
Right.
always arguing, that kind of thing. Um,
Right. And then
and
she
then
gets
it is
this
kind
phone
of
call
found out.
from Meg while that they're sitting at the. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, you go ahead.
So then while they're sitting at this diner, Marla gets the phone call from Meg saying, I'm so sorry for how my family reacted. I just found out that my mom is broke. She doesn't have any money, and this new will reading means I will not be in on the tuition and I'll have to drop out of school. And Marta, thinking that Meg is a good person, says, I will make sure you're taken care of. I won't let that happen. I will make sure that you get to continue going to school and get your tuition paid for. And what
Hmm.
Marta doesn't know is that Meg has just told her whole family that her mom is an illegal immigrant. And so now they have this blackmail against Marta.
Yeah, yeah, and so the whole family kind of starts to come down on Marta. They're all from this point forward in the story, they're all pressuring her, and they're all like trying to use this piece of blackmail that they have against her. But she kind of doesn't like she's worried about it the whole time, but it doesn't necessarily play a huge role until the end, kind of. So then we kind of learn that there's this autopsy report that's going to be coming out soon, and the autopsy report is significant. That they ordered blood work and stuff like that, so they um, are all kind of curious to look at it. And so let's talk about what actually happened from Marta's perspective, because Ransom knows. So now like us as the storytellers, we can kind of tell it. So from Marta's perspective, Marta was after the party got over, she was talking to Harlan about all of the things that they had done and that they had cut off everyone. And Marta was trying to. Marta had been trying to help Harlan encourage all of the other kids to be better and to do better, but he hadn't listened to her, and that it had gotten too far to the point where he just had to cut them off instead of like nudging them in the right direction, instead of just cutting them off. So it's once again showing that like Marta wasn't trying to steal these people's money from them. She was trying to help them all this whole time.
Yeah. So they are in this study after the party, and they're playing this game of Go, and which they play frequently. And um, Marta is his nurse, so she is going to give him some morphine because that is the painkiller drug that he gets to stay comfortable in his old age.
Yeah. And so they're kind of talking, having a conversation while Marta's drawing up meds. And she's not looking at him because ostensibly she does this quite a bit. So she's pulling up drugs, she's giving him drugs while she's talking to him. And she gets through giving the first drug, which was an antibiotic or something else. It was some other drug that was not the morphine. And then she goes to drop the morphine. And she looks at it, and she realizes that this was the other drug, and that what she ostensibly had pulled up and given him 100 mils of was morphine. So in theory, she had just given him 100 mils or 100 milligrams of morphine. So in the context of the story, they say that 100 milligrams of morphine is like fatal, and that he has like 10 minutes to live, which is a good storytelling device. It's not true. In fact, it normally takes up to 200 milligrams of morphine, and when this starts to happen, immediately call the police and do not go through the wacky shenanigans that they go through. But for a number of reasons. But first and foremost, do not like 100 milligrams of morphine might not kill someone. Like, they'll probably be pretty uncomfortable, but it's not like a guaranteed death sentence in 10 minutes, like the movie states. But
Right.
for the context of the movie, it works.
So first and foremost, you should call the police, which they don't. And secondly, you should look for the the life-saving drug, which you should
Yes.
have on hand.
Yes,
which they don't.
comes in a kit. So they do a good job with this in the movie. Also, is that you should have. Apologize, I have it pulled up here somewhere. Naloxone, 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 and it is normally, like, if you were administering morphine in this manner, it would come in a little kit, and you'd have like a bottle of naloxone and your morphine, and you'd have like way more naloxone than you would need, because that's the purpose of it, is to prevent an overdose of morphine. But for some reason,
Right.
Marta is digging through a bag, and it isn't there. So she's like, oh no, there's no chance that an ambulance is going to get here in time. And she's understandably freaking out. So Harlan's like, well, I'm dead anyway. Here's what we need to do. We need to cover this up, because he knows at this point that he has left all of his money to Marta, right? And he
Right.
probably ostensibly knows that even if it's an accident, even if it wasn't intentional, if Marta is the one who killed him, she would not be able to inherit all this money, and her mom would probably be deported, right?
As Harlan is an extensive mystery murder author, he would know all of the laws and speculations about this.
Yeah. So he is pretty well read up on the laws and stuff about this particular subject. So he's like, oh, this is not great. And at the time when he is when the drugs are being injected like that, and when Marta is looking for the life-saving drug, he's like, wow, this would be a interesting method of murder, and very clean, very efficient. and what if someone had switched the drugs on purpose? What would happen then? Like would that be not good either? And so Harlan's like asking all these questions about it, like as if it's something happening to someone in one of his books. So which is funny and ironic later too. But he is kind of going through this whole thing, and he comes up with this plan that Marta needs to go out, be seen going out to draw suspicion off of her, Then she needs to drive her car out and go past some of the elephants, sneak back around through the side gate, which is where the tracks in the mud came from, or some of the tracks in the mud. Climb up into the attic using the ladder and the secret window, go in, and then disguise herself as Harlan and go down and be seen as Harlan downstairs, so that everyone would know that Harlan was alive, or so that everyone would think that Harlan was alive after she had been seen leaving. And then also go back up and then climb back out the window and leave again, so that she would have a clean escape. And
Yes.
then
And so he's describing this to her. He's describing how to do all these things, and he has this very easily mapped out. He's got a clear cut proof and plan of how to get away with murder. What he doesn't account for is that Marta forgets how to avoid the security cameras on the way out. She cuts off the road before she is out of view of the security camera, so the security camera gets her on footage. And also, Harlan's mother, Juanita, sees Marta when she is about to climb back up the ladder. And also, Marta breaks off a chunk of the ladder as she's going up.
She also steps in the mud and does not notice it until she is like doesn't notice it at all, and so she leaves like the mud residue up in the attic too, like up in his study and on the carpet too. So they find traces of that later too.
Right.
And then they also and what was the other? There was one other piece of evidence that I forgot to mention at this point. I can't remember. But she is basically seen like she's not good at being a criminal. She is not sneaky about it. She literally cannot lie. So she is just and like Harlan also coaches her up on that. She's like, I'm gonna get asked about this by the police, and he's like, yes, but if you say like this exact thing in this exact order, you are not technically lying. You are telling the truth, just excluding things. So
you're just admitting the truth.
Yes, just admitting most of the truth. So
yeah,
she is she's doing all of that, and then she comes back upstairs to tell him that it worked after taking off the disguise, looking like Harlan, and she walks into the room, and at that point, Harlan, further wanting to exonerate Marta and throw suspicion away from her, he decides to slit his own throat, and with a large ornamental knife, and blood kind of spatters all over, and coincidentally, one drop lands right on her shoe. That'll be important later. So she kind of walks out, and she's shaken by this, and so she probably leaves more evidence on the way out of her, and she is seen by Juanita when she is coming back down, and Juanita says, Ransom, is that you back again? And so she
which we don't think
Marta,
much of, because
yes,
we don't think much
Ransom was there
of
at the
because
party.
he was there at the party, and also this lady is like 104 and old,
1,000 years
crazy.
old. Yeah,
yes.
and ostensibly kind of crazy. So that all kind of goes down, and so Marta at this point realizes in the future, when they're at the diner, that this toxology report will reveal that she is the one who killed Harlan, and so she's like, well, we've got to get that. So she's driving there, and she gets followed by the police, and they engage in this like very like silly like low speed car chase going through. It's all pretty funny. Also,
Because
when
Marta has an old
they were going
beat up
around,
Nissan.
yeah, Marta's driving around in a Nissan, so she cannot outrun the cops, and she's also not like a criminal, and she doesn't know how to drive a car to ditch a tail or anything like that. So she's like driving
Yeah,
around, and she's not good
she's
at
like
it.
a 5'3", she's like a 5'3" registered nurse, tiny little Brazilian gal.
Yeah. Also, while like before, the detective in on the case tells us that he was anonymously hired onto the case by just someone leaving a press clipping about it and a big old stack of cash on his front doorstep. And he also recruits Marta to be with him and around him while he is doing his investigation. So he kind of wants to keep her close to him, and he also tries to keep her like in it. But through doing this, she is able to like cover up some of her mistakes from before in her earlier committing crime. So like she intentionally walks through the mud again, and she gets a hold of the tapes for the of her like not pulling off the road after where she was supposed to, and like she erases those tapes, and she does like a few other little countermeasures to try and keep her from being discovered by Benoit Blanc. So they get to the place where the Emmy's report will be, and I think this is the next day or something like that, isn't it? I feel like it's like a day later or something. I can't remember.
Can't remember either, but I feel like you're right.
It's not really important, but they get in and they find that the housekeeper is there, and I can't remember the exact circumstances that were going on with that. Do you remember what exactly happened there?
When she meets up with the housekeeper or the
Yeah,
person who has the copy of the toxology reports.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
she
yeah, 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 yeah. So
Marta
she starts
gets
getting
an
messages.
email.
Yeah, go through that.
Yeah, when they're in this high-speed chase, Marta gets an email that there's a toxology report and she needs to uh meet. She'll get a copy of this report, but they need to meet at this address. And so she does. Um goes and she goes to this address, and when she goes in there, it's this dark and spooky laundromat, and she gets this briefcase that has the report in it, and she goes over to this person who is sitting in the chair at the end of this spooky dark area, and it's the housekeeper
Yeah,
who is not really connected to this story until now. And this housekeeper is seemingly unconscious and not breathing. And Marta, in an attempt to save the housekeeper, starts performing CPR to save her. And when she does this, the housekeeper says, "Hugh done it. Hugh did it. Hugh did it." As in, you, Marta, you did it. And um, Marta calls 911 and performs CPR and gets this housekeeper to the hospital in critical condition.
it doesn't the
But
laundromat
at this
start on
point,
fire too?
oh, I don't know. I know they bring an ambulance, but I don't know if it started on fire.
Yeah,
But at this point,
something like that happens.
Marta decides that it's gone too far. People are getting in trouble, people are getting hurt, and she is going to confess to Harlem and to the family that she was responsible.
So she goes to the house, and they're all kind of there. They've all been looking for her anyway, and they at various points they've all kind of called and confronted her. Even one of the brothers even came to her house and threatened her with the fact that her family is are or that her mom is an illegal immigrant. And they've all kind of been trying to pressure her to get her to give them what they perceive as their inheritance back. And if you want to keep going from here, Kate.
Yeah, so Marta goes to the house and she is getting ready to confess to them that she is responsible. knowing full well that when she does so, she will no longer get the inheritance, because if you murder someone, it's called the slaughtery law. If you murder someone, you do not get their inheritance, rightfully so. But she's getting ready to confess, and Harlem interrupts her.
Do you
Harlem
mean
says,
Benoit or Ransom?
Benoit, yes, sorry, Benoit. Benoit interrupts her and says, wait a minute, nope. Marta intends to keep all of the inheritance, and she is not sorry, and this is very clearly a suicide to me, and I am going to tell the police to conduct it so. And
Yeah.
then, Benoit says to the detective on the case, he says, tell everyone to get out except for this person, and he whispers his name in the detective's ear, and he takes Marta to the other room.
Yeah, and this whole time Benoit is like going on this big rant about how it's a donut, and there's been a hole in the center of the donut, and inside the donut hole there's another donut.
Yes, he does. And I wanted him to say that it was filled with jam raspberry jelly, but because I like the image of the blood splatter and the raspberry jelly,
Oh,
but he
that
didn't
that
make that
that that
enough.
that
I
would have been
know,
excellent. And
I know,
it's a
right?
raspberry, and it's a
It's a
raspberry.
raspberry filled donut hole.
And there's a hole at the center of this donut, and at the center of that hole is raspberry jam, the blood of Harlan Thrombey.
I think that would have been a better analogy. When they rewrite it, I'll suggest it.
When they rewrite this epic, amazing movie, they can do your thing. Also,
Take that
in the Glass
suggestion.
Onions movie, he also makes a reference to a donut hole. But keep going.
Nice. So, at this point, Marta is confused. She's like, "What are you talking about, dude? Why are you ranting about donuts? I don't understand. It was my fault. I am at fault here." And he looks at the toxology report and he starts putting pieces together. And the person he is asked to come into the room is Hugh. And Marta is like, "Hugh, like, it's okay that you told the detectives that I was guilty. Like, I told them that too. It's all good." Um, and uh, she thinks he's on his side still.
Yeah, and so Benoit kind of starts at this point going over like everyone's motives of why they would want to kill Harlan, but dismissing them, and one at a time he kind of goes through all the suspects and it's like no, 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 but he but Benoit kind of shows that Ransom decided to kill Harlan after being cut out of the will, and he kind of reveals how he was trying to do this, which was that he had also snuck up to the top floor there and switched the vials out from what Marta had done. So in the very manner that Harlan had imagined this very murder being committed, he had tried to commit it. So he had taken the label off of the morphine and put it on the other drug and swapped them back and forth and stolen the emergency life-saving drug. So he had pulled up. So when Marta had pulled up the drugs, she had unknowingly given him the right medication, and it wouldn't have killed him anyway.
And the correct
And
dosage.
also,
yeah.
Yeah, and the correct dosage. And he also, in a manner to prove this, he pulls the labels off of each of them and hands them to her and asks her to say which one is which. And she correctly identifies which one is the morphine and which one is the other drug, because she is a good nurse.
She notices the faint color difference in the two different drugs. So even though the bottles are identical and the labels are nearly identical, she can identify which drug is which just by the color. And she did that night. She correctly administered the dosage.
Also, like from dealing with lots of drugs like that, like certain drugs are certain weights, like you can just feel them, and the bottles are different densities sometimes. So like when you're holding two different drugs, you can normally tell, like especially if you're handling them a lot, which Marta would have been handling these two particular drugs because she was administering them daily to Harlan. She would have been handling them every single day, so she would probably pretty easily know which one was which drug. So she is completely exonerated of any crime here. The only thing that like maybe they could get her on was like disrupting an investigation or something like
Obstruction
that.
of justice. Yeah.
Yeah, but like no real crime. But then at this point, they kind of have Ransom dead to rights, and Marta receives a phone call from the hospital, and she says that it is the is that Fran, the housekeeper, who incidentally is the only one who ever called uh, Ransom Hugh. She gets this call, and she says that it is the hospital calling to say that Fran is alive, so she made it through. And so at this point, Ransom gets bold, and he's like, "Yeah, so what? I committed a little arson. I committed an attempted murder. Oh no, like big whoop. But like I'm gonna like with the right lawyer, I'm gonna be out of jail, and I'm going to make your life, Marta, a living hell this whole time." And then he's like bragging and all this stuff, and Martha vomits on him because she had been
Projectile vomits.
projectile vomits on to Ransom, and she reveals that she had been lying, that she did the one thing that she could never do, which is lie, and she was lying about the fact that Fran had actually passed away, and he had just admitted to her murder in front of the police and Benoit Blanc. And so at this point, he tries to murder her with one of the knives from this big theatrical prop that was from one of Harlan's books too. But he accidentally grabs a prop knife, like one of the knives that, like when you stab something, like the blade retracts.
Spring-loaded handle.
Yeah. So when you try and stab anything, it's just like crink, crink, and doesn't do anything. So that's two counts of attempted murder and one of actual murder for old old Hanyak, which less than ideal.
Right.
It,
Yeah.
Also, as a side note, isn't it also revealed that the one husband who was having an affair, wasn't he having it with Fran? I feel like that was a thing.
Oh, I don't know.
I can't remember. It kind of looks like the girl kind of looks like Fran, but I can't remember if it was her or not. I might be completely wrong about that too.
Okay, I'll fact check.
Perfect. Well, I'll kind of go over the end of the story. So,
Okay.
so Ransom, aka Hugh, is hauled off to jail, and it's also revealed that she was saying Hugh done it. That Ransom Hugh was the one who hurt her and tried to kill Harlan. So Fran was trying to solve the mystery too, and she did. And so basically that was another part that helped Benoit kind of solve this whole thing. And he also kind of knew that something was afoot the whole time, because the second that he saw Marta, he noticed that she had that one blood drop on her shoe. So that's kind of why he kept her close the whole time, was because he knew that knew that something was afoot the whole time. So from there, we kind of get this epilogue to the story where Marta is at the house, and like the whole family is there and like trying to talk to her, and she just kind of shuts the doors and is drinking out of one of Harlan's favorite mugs, and she is very pleased with the whole outcome of the thing. Ransom is in jail. She's got all the money. She's got the house. She's got like all of it, and she kind of came through this whole thing. After almost being accused of murder, she came out on top. Anything else that you want to talk about as far as the plot goes? Anything that I missed?
I don't think so. I didn't find anything about that affair.
That's all right. I might have completely made that up.
No, I think we covered it all. It's just a good story of this, like, the good guy wins in the end. And it's funny and it's goofy and it's an unreliable narrative. And uh, Marta wins in the end. So it's a good, happy ending.
Yeah. This is one, like I said, one of my favorite movies, hard stop. Like, this is a incredible, like, tale that they weave through this whole thing. It is very reminiscent of other murder mystery kind of movies, but it also like plays on your expectations of those movies. It's both a great murder mystery story in itself, but it also like plays with the tropes that are normal in those sorts of stories. So it like weaves that line really, really well. And that's one of the things that I really love about it. It's this incredible setting that's really cool, of this literal like clue board of a house and this and like the grounds and everything. It's just such a cool movie. Ryan Johnson did an incredible job. All the actors are amazing in this. Like, it's just such a good movie. And at some point I want to talk about Glass Onion, the next Benoit Blanc movie, and I hope that they keep making more of these. But I think next week we're going to start on the MCU. So I kind of want to do like the whole Infinity Saga of the MCU, kind of in like one long series of videos, or series of episodes.
All
So
right.
that's kind of what's gonna come next, is some of that, and we'll probably break it up with some other stuff in the middle. But that's kind of what I was thinking.
All right. Sounds good.
So we'll start with Iron Man next week.
All right. I'm excited.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. This has been the Off-Season Podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe. And if you're listening anywhere else, be sure to give us a follow and a rating. Be sure to follow us on all of our social medias. And be sure to check out Kate's tips and tricks from the Tetons and all the rest. Well,
Yay.
thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.